I came home to find houses built on my property. Imagine leaving the country for work, then coming home years later to find an entire HOA neighborhood built on your land. Paved roads, streetlights, luxury houses, families already moving in. At first, he genuinely thought he had the wrong address. But after checking the maps, the surveys, and the county records, he realized something horrifying. The developers had shifted property lines on paper, built directly over his parcel, and then the HOA tried calling him a squatter. What happened next turned into one of the most insane property battles imaginable, because instead of backing down, he took them to court. And eventually, a judge ordered entire houses demolished. Not metaphorically, actually bulldozed into rubble. According to the man telling the story, he bought the land years earlier while working remotely. It wasn't massive, just a quiet rectangle of dirt outside town where he someday planned to build a home. No structures, no utilities, just open space and trees. But according to him, he loved it immediately, especially the sunsets. The land felt peaceful, like somewhere he could finally breathe. He purchased the parcel legally, recorded the deed properly, and even kept all the paperwork locked inside a fireproof safe. Then, shortly afterward, he accepted a long-term overseas work assignment. According to him, the opportunity was too good to refuse. So he left the country, set up automatic property tax payments, and planned on returning years later to eventually build on the land. At first, everything seemed completely fine. The taxes stayed current, neighbors occasionally checked the property. Nothing seemed wrong. Then tragedy struck during the assignment. According to him, his grandmother became terminally ill. He flew home immediately to spend her final months beside her, and, according to him, she repeatedly encouraged him not to give up on his dream of building on the property someday. After she passed away, he eventually returned overseas again to finish the assignment. Then finally, years later, he came home for good. According to him, one of the first things he wanted to do was revisit his land. He expected weeds, maybe overgrown grass. What he did not expect was an entire HOA neighborhood. According to him, his stomach dropped instantly. There were paved roads, streetlights, luxury homes, landscaping, even a giant subdivision entrance sign. At first, he genuinely believed he had driven to the wrong location, but after checking maps and property markers, the horrifying truth became clear. The neighborhood had been built directly over his parcel. According to him, the developers had shifted property boundaries during subdivision planning. And somehow, the error made it through approvals. His land had effectively been swallowed into the HOA development on paper. The man immediately visited the county recorder's office. According to him, he spent hours reviewing plats, deeds, and survey records. That's when the situation became crystal clear. His original deed predated the entire subdivision. Legally, the land still belonged to him. But despite that, multiple homes had already been built there. According to him, the realization barely felt real. Entire families were preparing to move into houses sitting on property they didn't legally own. He hired a real estate attorney immediately, and according to the attorney, the situation was catastrophic for the developers because legally, the structures were trespassing improvements, meaning the court could potentially order them removed entirely. At first, the man hoped the developers would simply negotiate reasonably, but according to him, that hope disappeared almost immediately. The HOA representatives became arrogant and hostile. They accused him of causing problems, claimed he was confused. At one point, an HOA representative allegedly even called him a squatter on his own property. According to him, that was the moment he stopped trying to be nice. The lawsuit escalated quickly afterward. Surveyors confirmed the original property markers still matched his deed perfectly. The developer's survey work allegedly contained massive errors. Meanwhile, construction continued. Families kept buying homes, and according to reports, the legal mess became bigger every single week. Eventually, the man filed formal legal actions seeking quiet title, damages, and ejectment, meaning he wanted the structures removed from his land completely. According to him, the HOA and developers believed he was bluffing. They thought nobody would actually force homes to be demolished. But the judge reportedly viewed the situation very differently, especially after reviewing the original deeds and survey evidence. The court ultimately ruled that the man's ownership rights were valid, and according to reports, the subdivision plat was partially invalid where it overlapped his parcel. Then came the part that shocked everyone. The court ordered the encroaching structures removed. Actual demolition, not fines, not compensation. Removal. According to the man, the developers desperately tried stopping the order afterward, but the judge refused. At one point, the court reportedly stated the developers should have checked the property boundaries before building homes. Then demolition day finally arrived. According to the man, watching it happen felt surreal. Excavators rolled into the neighborhood while reporters filmed nearby. Families had already moved out. Developers stood nearby arguing into phones. Then the machinery started tearing the houses apart. Walls collapsed, windows exploded, entire luxury homes folded into piles of debris. According to him, some HOA board members still blamed him afterward. But by then, the courts had already made one thing clear. The disaster existed because developers ignored somebody else's property rights. Not because the rightful owner fought back. The fallout afterward became massive. According to reports, developers faced lawsuits, buyers sued title companies, and the HOA itself eventually started collapsing financially. Properties became unsellable. The subdivision entrance literally started falling apart, and according to the man, the entire neighborhood slowly became a symbol of arrogance and greed. Meanwhile, his land finally became quiet again. No more construction, no more fake property lines. Just dirt, trees, and silence. And honestly, the scariest part of the entire story is realizing how close the developers came to stealing someone's property permanently simply because they thought nobody would fight back hard enough to stop them. The retirement home worker got silent revenge. Every retirement home has that family. The ones who never visit, never help, never bring basic things their elderly parent actually needs. But the second there's a public holiday or free food, suddenly they appear pretending to care. One retirement village worker says there was one family so selfish and cruel that the entire staff quietly hated them. They barely visited their elderly mother, ignored her needs, and allegedly even took most of her valuables. Then, one brutally hot Australian Christmas day, they showed up unannounced, demanding seats at the village Christmas lunch. There was just one problem. The invitation specifically warned guests to bring warm clothes because the air conditioning inside would be freezing cold. The family ignored the warning, and according to the worker, that turned out to be a very big mistake. According to the worker telling the story, they worked inside a retirement village with a communal dining hall. Most of the elderly residents were kind, lonely, and just happy when somebody spent time with them. But according to staff, there was one family everybody quietly dreaded seeing. The family belonged to an elderly resident we'll call Sam. According to the worker, Sam herself was lovely, polite, gentle, always grateful. But her family treated her horribly. They rarely visited despite living only 15 minutes away. And according to staff, they constantly neglected basic things she needed. Clothes would go missing, personal belongings disappeared, and the worker strongly suspected family members were taking advantage of her financially too. But because they controlled her legal affairs, there wasn't much staff could officially do. According to the worker, that helplessness frustrated everyone, especially because Sam never complained about them herself. She always defended them, even when they ignored her for weeks. Then Christmas Day arrived. According to the worker, the retirement village hosted a special lunch every year for residents who didn't have family plans. Families were welcome too, but reservations had to be made in advance. The invitation also included one very specific warning: bring warm clothes, because the Australian summer heat meant the dining hall air conditioning would be extremely cold. According to the worker, everybody knew this already from previous years, so naturally, Sam's family ignored the instructions completely. They showed up late, without reservations and without warm clothing. According to the worker, the family immediately acted annoyed. When told accommodations had to be made last minute, still, the staff squeezed them in. That's when the worker saw an opportunity. Then they seated the family directly underneath the largest air conditioning vent in the building. According to the worker, the vent blasted freezing cold air constantly. At first, the family didn't notice, but after about 10 minutes, the complaints started. The son and daughter-in-law reportedly approached the worker looking irritated. According to them, the family demanded the air conditioning be turned down because they were freezing. The worker smiled politely and said, "No problem." Then, according to the story, they lowered the temperature even more, apparently all the way down to 16 degrees Celsius, which in an air-conditioned room during Australian summer feels absolutely brutal. According to the worker, the family became visibly miserable almost immediately afterward. Meanwhile, Sam sat there completely comfortable in her warm clothes, smiling happily, and according to the worker, that might have been the best part, because for once, Sam wasn't the uncomfortable one. The family kept trying to endure it for appearances. But eventually, they gave up. According to the worker, they left earlier than every other family in the building. The second they finally walked out, the atmosphere around Sam changed completely. Residents and staff gathered around her instead. People talked with her, laughed with her, treated her kindly. And according to the worker, Sam spent the rest of Christmas genuinely happy. No arguing, no neglect, no family acting like she was a burden. Just people treating her like a human being again. And honestly, the coldest thing in that dining hall wasn't the air conditioning. It was watching a family realize complete strangers cared more about their mother than they ever did. This story feels satisfying at first because the revenge is honestly pretty funny. Nobody got screamed at, nobody got publicly embarrassed, just ice-cold air conditioning and a family completely unprepared for it. But underneath the humor, the story's actually really sad because places like retirement homes are full of people whose families slowly stop showing up. At first it's missed visits, then forgotten birthdays. Then eventually some residents only really interact with staff anymore. And according to a lot of aged care workers, they notice way more than families think they do. They notice who visits regularly, who only shows up for appearances, and who treats elderly relatives like inconveniences instead of people. That's what makes this story hit harder than just petty revenge, because Sam herself still loved her family, even after being neglected, even after barely seeing them. And honestly, that happens a lot more than people realize. The worker never screamed at the family, never exposed them publicly. But for one Christmas lunch, they got to experience a tiny fraction of the discomfort Sam probably felt all year long. And the craziest part? The people who made Sam happiest that day weren't even her own relatives. It was the staff and residents around her, the people who actually treated her with kindness every day. Default text. Honestly, that's probably the most heartbreaking part of the entire story, because nobody should reach the end of their life feeling more cared for by strangers than by their own family. But what do you think? Did the worker go too far, or was this deserved after the way the family treated her? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoy stories involving karma, petty revenge, and real-life drama like this, make sure to subscribe for more.